Good morning or afternoon, wherever you're joining us. Just gonna give people a few moments to pile in here. Got Robbie in the wing, who's director of product here at Augmentt. He's going to be kind of helping answer questions and set up the Q&A. So please use the Q&A feature within Zoom so that way we can keep track of questions as they get answered. Um, but then also, yeah, drop any insights in the chats, anything that you want to add. Love to get community feedback on the content that we're going over today. Specifically, the title of the webinar is Does Microsoft Secure Score Tell the Whole Story? How basic and premium licenses can impact security. So to find get value for everybody here today, and we'll get started here in just a moment. All right. So for those who haven't met me yet, I'm David Haynes. I'm the Information Security Officer here at Augmentt. I run our compliance, and I also help a lot with working with MSPs on security questions and setting up best practice around their Entra environments. And so we wanted to pick a topic today on Secure Score. We get a lot of it from MSPs, and we've heavily sort of promoted Secure Score within the platform recently, making it more visible and easy for you to track because it's an easy metric to show to customers about the security within their environment. But there's a lot of confusion around what that score actually means and the frustrating experience that people live under the Microsoft banner of security by licensing. You have to pay for the licenses to get the security features to then get the score up. So, what is the Microsoft Secure Score? It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a numerical representation of your potential security posture. And it's designed to make it easy to identify priority actions. So, by saying what percentage value will be increased for the task assigned, it makes it easy for the technicians to tackle those items quickly and easily. And it does a nice feature. I didn't grab a screenshot. I should have, but it will show one Entra environment in Entra compared against a similarly sized one. So you can compare it. Yeah, 37 is not great. This is from one of our test tenants, so thankfully not a real environment. But yeah, 37 is not great. The components of this Microsoft Secure Score are identity, device, apps, and data, depending on the licenses that you have deployed out. So identity is protecting the accounts through MFA, conditional access policies, or other controls. Device is using Intune to manage policies on the device and the Defender for the endpoint. Apps, safeguarding apps through policies and secure access. And then data, making sure you have data loss prevention techniques and tools set up. So that would be exfiltration of data, mass sharing through SharePoint, external guest sharing, things like that. And all of those pieces of information come back in to Microsoft to assign your secure score. But again, it's all tied back into the great licensing problem within Microsoft. So when you have a business that's just deploying Business Basic, the top score you can get is around 40 to 50%. And so when you go to a customer and you say, hey, look, you got a great secure score, you're at 48%, they might see that and balk at that saying, what are you talking about? That's barely a pass, barely over 50%. But it's all based on licensing again. They're not willing to spend that licensing, then they're not going to be able to get the better score. If you deploy out a P1 license, this is a P1 or P1 equivalent. So this would include Microsoft Business Premium comes with a P1 license. If you have a Security E3 license, I believe, is also a P1 equivalent. And that'll get you up to about 70 to 80%. And then the big one, the P2 license, Usually you get that bundled in with different security um, packages or license packages. We'll get you to 80 to 90%. To get the full 100%, one, it's, in my opinion, unrealistic for many organizations to really strive for that. Um, because to get to that point, you're really trying to focus on specific compliance requirements if they are in banking, finance, government, defense contractors, anywhere where it's super high risk. If they're working like data centers, things like that, that's where you're going to really push for that 100%. Because again, you need that P2 license or equivalent, Microsoft Defender, Defender for Office, Defender for Endpoint, all bundled with an E5 license. And then you start to get into the 10, 15, 20, $30 extra per seat on top of your business license. And not many smaller organizations are going to want to stomach that cost. So it becomes that cost balancing equation. Um, and so that comes into the relationship that you have with the customer, knowing what their business needs are, and giving them realistic expectations on their secure score, um, and having that conversation with them. So with Business Basic, um, so just sorry, before I get to there, so from Microsoft and different articles that I found, generally speaking, Business Basic is like the target is for smaller businesses, fewer than 300 users. The big one there, minimal security and compliance needs, where they don't have a regulatory need to have specific conditional access policies and tighter control there. And generally, they need Microsoft just for their email teams, basic collaboration. Um, when you start to get into the P1, P2, that's when they have growing security concerns. They need to have a basic security governance. So governance is like the control and auditing and alerting off of actions, and that's what starts to come into that P1 license. So that's does they don't that will be part of their compliance, whether they are um, going for like if they're a SOC 2 organization or things like that, just being able to audit who does what, when, where, and why. And then P2 for like I said, for larger enterprises, financial institutions, regulated industries, organizations that have a requirement for privileged identity management, as well as identity protection, advanced governance around the documents and tools within and auditing within Entra, or again, strict compliance with data governance needs. And that's usually bundled with an E5 equivalent. So that'll get you the Microsoft Defender um, features as well. Um, so for the secure score on basic licensing, really what you're looking to tackle are enable multi-factor authentication for security defaults. Um, Basic doesn't come with conditional access, and per user is going away. Um, Microsoft keeps limping it along, but they've said many times that it's going to be going away. So having security defaults enabled, it'll let you set up your strong password policies and self-service password reset in a minimal way. It's not as robust as what you get with conditional or with a P1, P2 license. Um, you do get some governance auditing ability with enabling the unified audit log. It's something that we highly recommend that you have enabled across all of your tenants. Um, it'll give you information on like you want to limit your number of global admins. That's a big one. Or not, it's not a big one in terms of the score potential, but it's an easy one to hit quickly. Just knock off down to below 5 is the recommendation within Entra. Um, you can enable some OneDrive ransomware detections and Office message encryption. So that's a little bit of the data loss prevention that you would want to focus in on the higher level licenses. So you do get some basic DLP stuff there, but it's not a ton. But then also configuring anti-phishing and spam protection. Business email compromise is becoming like the biggest boogeyman nightmare across the Microsoft protection side. Um, so having something is better than nothing, and you can do that with Business Basic to some degree. What can't you do? This slide seems small, but it's actually quite a big slide. Obviously, you can't do conditional access policies. For those of you who aren't super familiar with them, you can do so many different creative configurations for for security within your tenant that it's worthy of a whole webinar on its own, let alone a slide with 3 points. Um, no identity protection or advanced security monitoring, and as I said, limited data loss prevention, threat protection, app governance. So this is why it goes back to it's business basic is ideal for those smaller companies who don't have those security requirements. Um, but then you can but then you have to have that conversation with them if you're using secure score as part of your business review with your customers, making sure that they have realistic expectations of their score, never going to be beyond 50% um, if they're not willing to pay. And one trap that we've seen MSPs get caught in is technically by enabling just one P1 license in the environment, everybody gets the features, but Microsoft has been trying to crack down a lot on that. Um, but
I'll add, we had a question around that in the Q&A. So
mhm.
like think of P1 and P2 licensing as your car, right? It could do 200 kilometers an hour, but there's still a speed limit. And so Microsoft has terms. So even if they give you access to things, you need to use them within the terms.
Yeah,
So they're cracking down on the speed limit recently.
yeah, they're really trying to like I said, make sure that their stock price is well maintained through licensing. Um, but yeah, I've seen reports on different Microsoft forums and Reddit or MSPs of customers getting burned by only deploying one and then getting hit without audit. So just be aware of it. Um, so P1 again that enables conditional access policies, and I think I saw a comment in there about security defaults not really doing MFA, and that's right. It security defaults kind of applies MFA based off of a lot of different internal logic rather than fixed rules um, that you can set with conditional access. So ultimately, if the we have seen a trend of some MSPs only signing customers up, and as a rule saying you have to have a P1 equivalent license with Microsoft, otherwise we're not going to sign you, just because it gives you that much more control over the actual security of the environment. It lets you boost their score as well if they sign up, and you can say, well, you have a 40% score now, and we're going to get you up to 75% in the first 30 days. It's a great metric to kind of um, push on, especially if they're a little bit unaware of what that actually means. Um, and then the other items with the P1 equivalent, self-service password reset with MFA is a big one. I saw a comment about self-service password reset. Definitely can be abused by attackers, and that's why the P1 having it set up so they can reset passwords, but it's controlled by MFA, letting them reset it, um, reset their password while getting an MFA prompt is better than what they can have with Business Basic. Um, Group-based access management and role assignment is something that I don't see talked about or see a lot in different configurations, but I think it's something, especially if you're going for this is kind of the outside of what the secure score doesn't really capture, um, is that least privileged access and role-based access control. So rather than assigning roles specific to users, assigning those users to groups makes it a lot easier to control who has access to what and when, um, for that management, and especially for auditing. If you're going for any compliance, or your customers are going for any compliance, making it really easy to identify that that whole concept of role based access control um, only becomes available with that P1 or a higher equivalent. And then yeah, basic threat detection through Microsoft Defender. Um, the P1, what you can't do. The big one is identity protection via risk-based conditional access policies. It's one of those again. The frustrating thing with Microsoft is that they give you a little bit to get a taste for it, and they lock some really intelligent stuff away. Um, so being able to configure conditional access policies to react based off of the user risk um, can be really useful in your customer's environment. Doesn't really play a huge part into your secure score. Um, but what that allows you to do is if you have a team that travels a lot and one day they're in the States, the next day they're in Europe, then they're in Asia visiting their factory, and they try to sign in to their account and they get all of a sudden they're a medium or a high risk, you can have it configured so that way they have to pass a different MFA check or it's blocked entirely, or they have to pass an MFA check but also do a password reset. There's a lot of different ways that you can configure it to make it so that way the user's workflow and their day-to-day operations can go smoothly without while still being secure, without just pure blocking them. Um, and then privileged identity management um, is something that I think more and more MSPs are adopting internally, running P2 licenses themselves. This one's a great feature. It allows you to do just-in-time security for role access, and especially within the scope of MSPs being a target for attackers around it's much more valuable for an attacker to breach an MSP who has 100 customers than it is for them to breach one customer for an attack. And with privileged identity management, you can really lock down who can access what and when um, in dynamic ways that, similar to conditional access policy, is worth its own 15-20 minute conversation. But that in and of itself doesn't get covered by secure score in a way that's going to bump your percentage up 2, 3, 4, 5%. I think it's like a 1% increase, but it actually has a much more significant impact on the overall security posture of your organization than some of the other more higher pressing ones like we saw in this earlier slide of like safe link policies for email messages. Valuable, absolutely, but I would almost say that PIM has should have a well deployed PIM setup should have a higher impact on your score. And so yeah, just kind of tying it back to maxing out your security score. Like I mentioned earlier, every user needs to be licensed, which once you add on the business basic and then you tack on the if you just do a pure P1 license add-on, that's $12 a user per month. That's doubling a customer's costs. Now, you'll get different rates depending on your distribution deals. This is just rack rate off of Microsoft's website um, for the example of it. But and then P2 is $9 instead of 6. You can get it bundled in with the premium, and there's other packages that you can add on top of it. Um, the end of the day, the Microsoft's gating features obviously by licensing. It's the bane of everybody's existence, and having those conversations becomes more and more frustrating within the um, those sales conversations you have to have with the customer about what they actually need versus what you guys can provide with the tool set that you have. Um, and so to have those conversations and be more meaningful, Robbie and the product team here at Augmentt and the engineering team have really tried to help push Secure Score, make it easier for your team to identify um, off of the front on the posture page what the secure scores are. We've now added the ability to see that and then also sort by secure score. So you can see who your top ranking ones are, who your bottom ranking ones within the postures that we have ourselves that we can configure. We have it set up so that way you can see which ones are configured and what the percent score would be the increase. So it's really easy for your team to go in and make those changes for your initial assessments with the customers. Our threat report has it front and center. The summary report has it front and center. So it's very much an important metric for it to be part of the conversation with customers. Um, but because of the way Microsoft kind of weights rankings of different feature sets based off of licensing, I think you can have that a relatively secure 70% score with a well configured conditional access policy stack and PIM, but that still might cap out the 20% that you might potentially get um, based off of the organization not needing those extra low level scoring, if that makes sense. Um, so I want to turn it over to the Q&A. I see the chat's been filling up. But Robbie, do we have a questions, or has it just been discussion so far?
Yeah, we do have a question around risk-based policies. So someone's
Mm.
asking how much control you have over what Microsoft considers a risk, and what's your experience been on that?
Ultimately, it's very little control over what they consider risk, and that's why um, layering conditional access policies with different tools becomes important. Um, for example, if the sign-in risk is high, but the login is coming in off of a managed device, you might say that that's actually less of a risk because you know, okay, well, that person, they are on a trade show conference tour and they're bouncing from city to city to city to country to country to country. So Microsoft might assume, oh, that's very unlikely travel for them. But the device is the same. We might layer that down. That means that you'd have to have a Intune device policy, roll out Intune across the team there, um, and you want to then layer conditional access policies based off of the actual what they're trying to access. So if you have a high sign-in risk and they're trying to access the admin portal, yeah, I think it's completely legitimate to just have it block access, sign that user out of all apps, and revoke all sessions, and just have that be your policy. And then you have the VP of sales calling you saying, "Hey, I'm trying to get in to make some changes." Well, or I'm trying to access my email. Well, your account was just trying to access the admin portal from a high risk sign in. So we're gonna have you do a full account reset on that in that regards. Um, but then um, so you can layer it to make it restrictive, or if the sign of risk is then a medium, you can have it set up so that way it's um, it doesn't allow them access to the admin portal, but they could get access to their email as long as they pass an MFA token or MFA prompt. So that gives you that little bit extra security around like the high risk actions that users might be trying to take.
Awesome. So another question we had, and it starts with not entirely related. So it says, does Microsoft 365 have a license that users can use to add multi-factor authentication on their local computer? I might get roasted in the comments here, but I believe the answer is that that is not a feature of Microsoft. So you'd have to go third party for that.
I think you are wrong. I think it depends on the device because I believe Windows Hello can be used as MFA
Oh, gotcha.
on
Fair point.
devices. So if you have a Windows Hello enabled laptop camera or Windows Hello um, enabled webcam, that would work. Um, the you can also, if you have Intune, the device itself can be registered, and that can it kind of qualifies for multi-factor. It's something you have um, that's secure. So if the concept behind multi-factor authentication is something you have and something you know, then yes. The other one, I don't know if outright if you can configure a hardware token like a YubiKey to be a MF like an unlock device for a laptop, but that's I wouldn't be surprised if that's configurable. I just haven't explored that myself.
So to reframe that, because you had 2FA specifically, so I guess you won't necessarily have to go through two logins, but you can set some type of anti-phishing or phishing resistant or passwordless type of login. That should
Yep.
suffice. Very good. I think we had something. Okay, so someone in the chat said We've got a CA policy blocking access for users without MFA, but Augmentt reports not compliance. Obviously, I said log a support case, but I think I realized afterwards what you're saying. So in the way that we look for MFA compliance, so MFA enforcement has to be there and MFA registration. So just because you're blocking conditional access policies, blocking via conditional access policy the ability to log in without MFA, we've seen plenty of this in our own base where second devices have been registered against users, or a user had never successfully registered a device in the first place. And so a device registration was put in place by a hacker through phishing or other methods, man in the middle, etc. And so that's why these need to be highlighted regardless. So if they're not going to be an account with MFA, you should be blocking it, blocking the account from logging in, and our reports will recognize that. Otherwise, we will keep notifying you that you have accounts that don't have MFA registration complete. Hence, that could be stolen by a malicious actor.
And that's one of the reasons why we added in our posture templates to I think it's two different posture templates where um, uh, uh, require MFA registration from a known trusted location doesn't require MFA, and then outside of a known trusted location, it does require MFA. And
Yep.
the idea behind that is that you can have the customer's home office be a known trusted location. It kind of counts as something you have. Um, that way, during their orientation, they come in, they sign up or they sign in, they get prompted for MFA, they can register their phone or their YubiKey, whatever their devices of choice. And then if they are out and they want to register a second device, you don't have that instance of a potential attacker hijacking and trying to register their own MFA device um, without first passing an MFA prompt themselves. Um, so
Yeah,
that's why.
and to elaborate on that somewhat differently, um, this is why you require MFA to register MFA, and then you also use temporary access passes.
Mhm, exactly. And these are all like points that it's just going back to here. The wording here says like most people don't actually need this. I think someone in the comments I thought said talking about how security defaults really doesn't do much because it's the identity. What was it? The Microsoft Identity Magic, and that's really right. You don't have these levels of control around who registers MFA devices, what and when. And so we do see a growing, as I said, a growing push to have minimum P1 equivalent um, and across the customer base for certain MSPs because you get this granular control. Um, and unfortunately, that isn't reflected properly in the secure score in terms of the uplift that you get from taking advantage of these to go from 50% to 70% or 80%. Um, when within conditional access, you can do it. You can do so like I said, it's worthy of its own 40-minute webinar on just like talking about conditional access. If you're not super well versed in it, there's so many different things that you can do. Um, I know that's not the point, but I love talking about it. Um, so
All
just to
the
kind of
questions
like
we have for now, unless someone else has,
yeah
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to just like quickly summarize like recap. I didn't put a recap slide in, but ultimately what you're aiming for if all you want to do is big score or big number means big score, um, then getting out of the business basic is where you're going to start to see those returns for that. If your customer really needs proper security, rather than just having like a little like shed lock on the outside of their house, having an actual deadbolt, that's where you're going to start getting in those features there. That P1, P2, that secure score, the uplift on it, you're going to start to see. I think I didn't grab a great screenshot. Um, but within the percentages to for the score impact, there's going to be a dozen or 2 dozen related to conditional access policies, where you're going to start to see that uplift of conditional access policy to block high risk sign-ins, conditional access policy to force MFA, to block um, uh, foreign IP addresses, foreign countries where they shouldn't get access. So that's where you're going to see that biggest lift is from conditional access policy and really mastering that. And that's where the security really comes into play.
New question popped in. So if you have a third-party filter, I presume filter or like MFA tool, um,
Can
oh,
you can you
sorry, as
bully
opposed to
Microsoft?
Defender, yeah, can you tell Microsoft to up the score, or do they
Absolutely.
require it to be their filter? Yeah.
No, so you can within Augmentt as well as within Defender, you can go in and click on the secure score item and say, I think it's managed or alternate mitigation is the wording. So this is for Defender, or if you're using Duo or any other third-party MFA method, you can say mitigate it elsewhere. And that will tack that 3% or 2% or 1% onto the score um, for you.
Yeah. And I'd say generally speaking, you can increase so you'll have conversations with your customers about recommendations that you should be doing for the environment. They'll say no for reasons, right? And so, you won't enable block legacy authentication because they want to keep an old printer that has to do something and it doesn't support it. You can also say you're accepting the risk. You can put in the reason, and then this can be part of it will give you the score points, and it simply ensures that there's acknowledgement, on your behalf, on the customer's behalf. And you can, and yes, as David pointed out, you can do that in Augmentt as well. So you can set those either third-party alternate mitigation or acceptance of the risk with the notes that go along with it. We will display those notes in your reports. So when you pull your secure score, your security posture report, it will show the type of secure score mitigation and the notes that you've associated to it as well.
Exactly. There's a comment about P2 license for just one user instead of every user. Is Microsoft coming after people for that? It's not consistent. They don't seem to be targeting everybody all the time. I have seen a few reports on the R-dash MSP about MSPs talking about getting hit by a Microsoft audit, and the penalty for it differs depending on the case. I've seen it where they just have to assign licenses and then move forward, and they're fine. Um, but based off of the terms of service within Microsoft, because conditional access policies or the alerting features or the defender coverage covers every user in the tenant, you can't say, oh, Robbie's only going to be have conditional access policies applied to him and everybody else isn't included. um, because of the way it works, every user in the environment needs to have licenses. um, and I in the terms of service, I believe it's outlined that if they can trace it back to a certain date, you'll have to pay backdated license fees with a penalty on top of it, based off of a percentage of like 1.5 times the cost or something like that. I can't remember the specifics, but it's something along those lines. Um, so I highly recommend that if you have any tenants who are trying to be cheeky around Microsoft licensing, have those conversations with them before they get caught. Because it's one thing to stomach paying a couple $100, a couple $1,000 extra a month, depending on the size of the tenant, versus being hit with 10, 15, $40,000 worth of backdated license fees, depending on the size of the crime. Yeah, yeah, Matthew. Yeah, plus a 50% penalty fee. All
I
right.
just plugged an upcoming webinar where Matthew, which has been responding diligently in the chat, will be touching on exactly that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, Microsoft licensing is something that is regularly confusing, and hard to keep on top of as it constantly changes as well. So I will be in attendance for that one. But if there's no further questions, I hope that this sheds some insight on sort of secure score, and how it kind of ties into licensing and highlights some of the weaknesses of just using secure score. Um, and Yeah,
I don't know if AJ is kidding. Stanford now has a PhD program for Microsoft licensing. This is
would
great.
not
Um,
would not be inappropriate.
says it's kidding. And again, I've put it in the chat, but things go quick. I would say join us on community.augmentt.com. There's been a lot of good discussion and questions, and I think we could keep going deep on a lot of these topics, come to good, consensuses for the channel, and uh, make good reference documents for everyone else. So this
Yeah,
is we would love to see you there.
awesome. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of the day.